Welcome to Did You Know with Richard Utley. During this 1-hour program, join us as we take a look at today's headline news, Richard's views, history, inspirational interviews, and much more. Did you know this program airs every first and third Tuesday at 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube? Here's Richard now. Sit back and enjoy today's featured presentation.
Well, good day. Welcome to another Did You Know? Well, we're going to have a very interesting program today. I'm going to try a couple things new today. But before I bring my guest on, I want to talk about a couple things. Well, we just had an election. So hopefully the election went the way that you wanted it to go. But you see how important it is when we put ourselves together and we go out there to determine the outcome of a lot of elections. Well, that's over now. We're getting ready to go into a new political season. And the next political season is going to be very important. It's going to be very important because if we don't participate, if we don't start the plan, we're going to be in trouble. I'm sure you already heard about the midterm elections, and hopefully that the Democrats can take the House or the Senate and have some kind of control on government. There's supposed to be 3 equal branches of government. I'm sure all of you know that. That's what we were taught in school. But we all know it ain't working that way today. A lot of things that we were taught in school, it's not going the way that we were taught. And a lot of things we weren't taught, folks don't want us to know about. And that's why I'm telling you all now, we need to find some candidates, some good candidates to run for public office. And I'm going to give some of you an assignment out there. Think about running for office. Think about it. Think about the impact that you can make on your community, in your neighborhood, and for the vested interest group that believes in you. So this is my assignment. For the next holiday season, or whatever you want to call it, what I want you to do is think about running for office. Talk to your family, talk to your friends, and when January comes, be ready to roll. So think about it. Think about the impact that you can make on your neighborhood or your community. A lot of you out there could bring a lot, but you don't want to run because it's an issue. You don't want to run because of the naysayers. You don't want to run because it costs money. Or you don't think you can win. I can tell you this. There was a friend that ran for judge in Dauphin County. Latasha Williams, she ran for judge 3 times. She ran. Nobody gave her no hope. But she had hope and belief in herself. And guess what? She won. She's now the first female African-American on the Dauphin County Common Police Court. Why? Because she had a vision and she had a dream, and she didn't let people just continue to pour water on her dream. I had another friend in Allegheny County some time ago. She ran 1, 2, 3, 4 many times, but she had a dream and she had a vision, and she didn't let nobody deter her. And she's on the Allegheny County Common Police. Here's my point. Don't think what you can't do if you don't try. So I want all of you out there to have vision. I want all of you out there to have hope, because we need you. Number 2, I keep telling you, instead of fighting this voter registration and voter ID stuff, we're going to have to get together. So we're going to have to counter what they're trying to do. How do I know that? I was up at the Capitol Hill in Harrisburg yesterday. And guess what? I saw on the calendar, voter ID is on there. I'm not saying it's going to pass. I'm not going to say it isn't. But it's on the agenda. It's going to continue to be on the agenda. So what do? We got to mobilize and register people. Make sure they have ID. And some people say, well, why we got to have ID? Don't take this wrong. Those of you who drink adult beverages, you have to have ID. Those of you, you got to have ID. And when you get certain places, you have to have ID. So let's stop fighting this ID situation and prepare for it. Let's prepare for war. That's what I'm calling it, war. Political war. We're in this now. We don't have no choice. We're in this, and we're going to have to find out instead of counter. We got to be counterproductive now. We can't sit around singing, "Oh, it's too late." So I'm giving you that suggestion. Some of you sitting back, and some of you know that who should run for office. You got a couple months to talk them into running for office, because in January is when you got to get ready to rock and roll, and that's when you got to get them petitions out. So I want you to think about it now. So you got almost a month, got about 6 weeks to think about running for public office, because some of you are so good and you need to do that. And the other thing is I want to bring up, with civil rights under threat, that's why I keep saying to you, we got to register to vote. And for some of you who walk around and you get very comfortable to where we are in America, I think you better go back and do a refresher course on Project 2025, because we get too comfortable. We forgot about it. And we don't realize a lot that was put in that book, a lot that you were told is coming to fruition. And I get upset when people say, well, I didn't know this was going to happen. Well, I didn't know they were going to do this. You were told. Now, you might have didn't believe it, but you were told it. So some of you who walk around, you better go back and have a refresher course on 2025. The other issue is that bothers me and troubles me all the time is that we act like we don't either want to know our history or we're not interested in our history. Listen, you got to know your history. You got to know where you came from. And so you got to start doing your history. That's why when I say to you things like, who's James Weldon Johnson? Who is he? I'm not going to tell you who he is. Find out who he is. A lot of you may not know his name, but you will know him for some other reason. We talk about, nobody wants to talk about woke, and people think that, we got a fair advantage, with affirmative action and things of that nature. That's why I want you to do your history so that you can go back and reflect. I want you to go back to Howard University Medical School in 1868. Why was it Harvard Medical? Why was it Howard? Why was it Howard? Where was Harry? Why do we have our own medical schools? Think about it. Think about why we did some of the things we did. So if we got through it, we can get through it again. My point is this here, ladies and gentlemen. My point is that we have to understand that we need to understand who people were, and we have to pay our kudos to them. That's why I tell you to go back and look in your community and find out who your community leaders were. We don't need to talk about whether it's Martin Luther King or Jesse Jackson or people like that. We need to find out who the people were pillars in our community. And another thing I want you to do, I want you to go back and look in your files or look in old magazines and stuff and see who played a role in that community. And I'll just give you an example. I have a good friend. He don't even know I'm going to mention his name today. His name is Ron Hill. He found out that he had relatives, and a relative is one of the first and few early on black baseball players that made it to the Hall of Fame. How did he find out? Because he did some research and he stayed focused on it. So I want you to stay focused on it as well. Go back and look at your community. Go back and let's honor the leaders that we have in our own community. Because I'm telling you, and I get so upset, there were people before us, and there will be people after us. Let's reach our hand back and bring them on up and give them the notification, the notoriety that they deserve. because there's so many people. There's so many people that played a role in my life. And I know there's people who played a role in your life. And so, if nothing more, I'm going to give you another assignment. I just want you to sit there and just think about some of them. And a lot of them may be gone, but sit there and go, oh, yeah, I remember Uncle such and such said such and such. Or I remember Miss Hattie down the street there. She played an important role in my life. So now I want you to look back at who played a role in your life because I think that's very important. The other two things is, um, and I have Ron Hill on there so you can say, who is Pete Hill? Find out who Pete Hill is. But he did his research and now he's telling the story of another Hill. The other thing is, I want you to start, I'm going to start bringing things up. You know, I have a good friend, Claude Anderson. Dr. Claude Anderson, those of you who don't know him, look him up, Google him. And you know, he one of his favorite books is, I have his favorite book, and it's called Black Labor, White Wealth. Read it. Let's start doing our own reading and our own research. That's one of our issues. We don't read. We watch 5 minutes of news and then we go out and we quote it. Or you see something on TikTok or you see something on Facebook and you think it's gospel and you're out there and you become a gospel preacher of the information. But let's talk about positive things. Let's talk about things that will help us. All right? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do something different today. I'm bringing a guest on that I had on before, but we're going to do a little different today. I'm going to turn my program on to him for the remainder of my program. And before I bring him on, let me tell you how I scoped it. I called him up and we talked. I said, you know what? I want to bring you back on my program, but I'm going to let you do my program. He said, what do you mean? I said, I'm not going to ask you questions. I want you to tell my audience some of the things that you think that we need to know. That was number one. Number two, I said, look, you're a young man. Give the young message. Try to relate to the young message that you think that we need to know. And number three, I normally don't do this. You've had them, you've all seen them before, the first, the few, and the only by Michael Thornhill. The other issue is we're going to try something today. You can call in to him and talk to him. If you have some questions, then you put them to him. So you see, 717-889-7181. That's going to be the phone line. Call him. Join the conversation. I'm going to try this. And hopefully it'll work. And I told him if we have some technical difficulties, I'll be sitting right here in the studio so I can rescue him. So I'm going to bring him on now. There it is. Bring him on.
What's up,
Well,
guys? How we doing?
it's your program now. So I'm
All
going to
right.
sit back, make phone calls to him, whatever you want to do.
Fantastic. Well,
You
hey,
got
everybody. My name is Michael Thornhill, the author of The First, the Few, and the Only. It's such an honor to be with you guys. I'm really excited for who's going to call in a little bit. So go ahead and maybe can we put that number up on the screen? I think it's 717 something, something, something. And feel free to call in.
there it
In the
is.
meantime, I'm going to give you guys a quick heads up about what I wrote, why I wrote it, and some thoughts on the topic. So I'm just going to open up the book. The book is called The First, the Few, and the Only. And if you were ever the only black or brown kid on the bus, in the classroom, in the pews, or in the corporate office, I just want to know that if you've ever been in a space where you're the only one with your face, this book is for you. And all the more if you are a white body, you have a white body, and you had a friend when you were a kid, or you claim to be the best friend of the only black and brown person in the office. I want you to know this book is for you too. I went so far as to write Appendix A entitled "White Eyes Only," just for you. And so, at the end of the day, this book is about bodies, and it's about stories. And so, in light of those stories, I wanted to highlight a section of the book to you guys. So as you guys call in, I'm going to contextualize what I wrote and why I wrote it by starting with the afterword. called From Ones Who Witnessed Me First. I open up with a quote by Audre Lorde from her work, A Litany for Survival, which goes as such. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone, for those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways coming and going in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward at once, before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures. You see, what began as a moment became a mirror. What became a mirror became a map. This book is not just a book, it is cartography. It charts the terrain that so many of us have walked in silence, the quiet violence of tokenism, performative inclusion, erasure, racialized promotions, backstabbing sambos, the precariousness of white women, code switching, and the disorientation of being the only one in rooms that were never meant for our wholeness. I write like someone who has felt the water rise and chose not to drown. I write for us. And then there's Don Quixote, one of the three characters of the book. There's something in the DNA of this book that is inherently quixotic, not in foolishness, but in the brave insistence on dreaming of a better world. I, like Cervantes before me, defy the logic of my time by imagining a different one. Don Quixote dreamed of knighthood in a cynical age. I dream of dignity in a world addicted to exploitation. I step into the armor of language not to escape reality, but to reshape it. What Cervantes did in the 17th century, I want to do now, with courage, with clarity, with a kind of imagination that can only come from someone who has survived systems of erasure and still insists on speaking. This book is for those who are tired of surviving. This book is for those who are told they are too much, too angry, too sensitive, too black, too brown, too neurodivergent, not black enough. This book is for those who have been asked to explain themselves, diminish themselves, justify their presence, or even decorate the diversity brochure without a seat at the table. This book is for those who tried to belong, but now know better. This book is for those who still believe in the power of story, even if their own has never been told in these pages. I do what all great visionaries do by naming the pain without letting it ever be the end of the story. To you, dear reader and listener, I offer breath, belonging, inheritance, rage, and rupture, and even grief. And I seek to map out what many have lived and few have had language to name. And just know and be warned, I don't offer a neat solution or an answer. I offer a mirror. And if you're willing to look, a key to what you may ask, decisions and dreams. This book is not an escape, it's a skeleton key, and also impossibly a prayer. Because you see, to stand at the shoreline and feel the waves crash is one thing. To find someone standing next to you, 10 toes down, eyes closed, chest open, as if to say, we will do this together, smiling. And that's what this book is. So breathe and let yourself be seen and dream an impossible dream, one you cannot wait to wake up to. You see, the title of this book is The First and the Only. And the reasons some stories go quiet for a long time. When they're finally spoken, they change how we understand identity, power, belonging, and even possibility. And that's a mirror memoir. And that's what I wrote. Um, it's the kind of memoir that reads you back. And so, with that being said, feel free to call in. I'd love to discuss it and talk about what came up for you as I read that. And as you call in and as we figure out what that means, I just want to clarify what tokenism is. And I'm going to read from my part of the book lives online. It's 412 pages. It's two books in one, and it has a digital companion. So I'm reading from Appendix C that lives online. Tokenism is not an accident. It gives the illusion of choice, happenstance, and freedom to the melanated, like rats believing they have a choice in the maze, but still trapped by the designer of the labyrinth. You see, it is a design, a psychosocial hamster wheel that keeps black and brown bodies on their knees long enough, low enough, forever the minority enough for whiteness to feel tall. The single black pastor in a white evangelical church, given visibility as much as a mascot has, but no authority. The one Asian executive in a C suite, a statistic of diversity, but never a threat to the real decisions. the school administrator whose ethnicity is ambiguous enough and their commitment to that ethnicity is ambiguous enough to be palatable, but whose culture is so fragmented that they basically blend in with ease. And the charismatic Latin employee who gets promoted just enough to be seen, but positioned carefully so they never wield real power. And white institutions may call this progress, meanwhile, they still flinch when the black and brown employees eat lunch together. And so, with that being said, the call lines are open. I just want to, for those that don't know the book and don't know me, hopefully that gives you a great flavor of what I'm bringing to the conversation. And checking in, do we have any callers on the line?
Not as of yet, sir.
Not as of yet. That's all right. And so, with that being said, Richard, you talked about collective memory. And Chris, whenever someone calls, feel free to just go ahead and interrupt me and let me know. Um, the thing about change is that change can't happen without a clear memory of what happened before we came. I love what you said about we got to reach back and we got to what's that term, sankofa. We have to go back and get it right. Um, and that's really important because there's a lot of history that's kept from all of us. And I'm not just talking about bodies of culture. I'm talking about white bodies too. Um, and but once we have collective memory, then we can finally face collective pain. Collective pain is book two. And then once we have collective memory and collective pain, we talked about collective power, and that's book three. All three books are already written. Book one has just come out. And so I was driving. I had a friend of mine reach out to me and say, "Hey, man, more people need this book. Here's a X amount of dollars. I want you to give away however many free copies this buys." Within 24 hours, it bought about four books, and within 24 hours, three out of the four books were already gone. Like people reached out and was like, "How can I get one?" Um, one woman reached out to me, a white body woman that I used to work with at Camp Allegheny for the Salvation Army, and when we were like younger people, and she reached out and was like, "Hey, is there a free copy still available?" And I was like, "Actually, yes. Are you home?" She was like, "Yeah." I was like 7 minutes away from her, so I pulled up, and she was just sort of gobsmacked by the fact I've been seeing so much of what you're doing with this book. I'm so excited to have one. I have a daughter who's neurodivergent. I heard you have a chapter on being black and neurodivergent, um, and so she was excited to get a copy of that. Yeah, man. Writing this book has been an incredible journey, not just for me and my story, but a journey of naming, of my experience of being black and brown in the evangelical church, my experience of being black and neurodivergent in a world that doesn't believe ADHD is a thing, and a world that doesn't believe black pain is a thing. And so, growing up with that, I named that. I named what it was like to sort of not grow up as a token, but then all of a sudden my senior year I guess, become the token, and really unpack what that meant for me. Uh, and yeah. Um, so anyway, another thing I want to talk about is Brother Richard talked about politics, and so I have a chapter called "Burning House Politics." I don't know if many of you know this, but one of the last conversations, not the last conversation, Harry Belafonte had with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was sort of checking in because Dr. Martin wasn't feeling too good after some like planning meeting. And he said, "What's wrong, Martin?" And Martin essentially says something to the effect of, I fear that I led our people into a burning house. And and regardless of which party he was speaking about specifically, I make the case that that applies to both parties. And that's not me inviting any listener to sort of lean away. I know the brothers that say, "Man, that's why I never vote." Um, uh, I believe that burning house politics talks about the fact that either house you choose is you're choosing to die with it. But what that also invites us to is to engage in local political change, right? Instead of expecting the big house to save us, walk into the little house that lives next door, right? That affects your town, affects you locally. And so it's an invitation into engagement and an invocation against illusions. And that's what I seek to do with the burning house politics. Um, I was speaking at Point Park University recently. I was invited to speak to a James Baldwin course, and they brought me in to talk about how my book relates to James Baldwin, who heavily inspired my writing. And so I was asked a question, something like James Baldwin wrote to his nephew, Ta-Nehisi Coates, in this book, Between the World and Me, wrote to his son, in what way did you write this book to your kids? And I got a son and a daughter, and I'm not gonna lie, I never wanted to raise them in the north. I never wanted to raise them north of the Mason-Dixon line. But I'm based in Pittsburgh, and where I experienced tokenism, and I never wanted that for them. And so one of the first and foremost reasons I wrote this was so that they're, if I should go before they do, uh, uh, that they'll know their daddy. Um, Not as the world sees me, not even as their mother sees me, but according to me, and they would know my stories. And then secondly, I wanted them to have an unpolarized perspective of an exploitative and polarizing world. I'm being black and brown in the U.S., being Afro Latino in a black or white world, where I've often been too Latino for the blacks, and I've often been too brown for the Latinos. You see, uh, I tell a story in the book about when I was given up for adoption as a child, and when I later met my biological Cuban family, the Leons, I discovered that it was confessed to me by my biological aunt, my tia, that one of the reasons I was given up for adoption with my brother was because there were no negros in la familia. There were no black or morenos in the whole line. And so, because the abuelos didn't want anyone with my hue in the Cuban family, they pressured my biological mother to give us up. And so, before I was even experienced the world, I was experiencing anti-blackness, if you will, in the Latin community. And so, for someone who never fit in, it offers a unique vantage point uh, of seeing things clearly. But admittedly, there's a danger to seeing things too clearly. If any listener knows, if you're the family member that people are nervous to hear speak at the Thanksgiving dinner table, if you're the family member that people can't get away with stuff as easily, that's just normally accepted in the family. Um, then I think you have a little taste of what it's like to be me, and I have a taste of what it's like to be you because I never. My perspective invited me into the danger of seeing things too clearly and calling a spade a spade. And so, as Lauren Hill says, that a lot of people they don't want reality. They want fantasy, but reality is what people need. And so, we're fantasy breakers. And so, another question I was asked at this course at Point Park University was about my experiences in the church. Um, I was a missionary and minister in the evangelical church. I trained missionaries and ministers throughout the United States, interacted with leaders of different ministries and churches and denominations globally, and met some big hitters. I know some big hitters. I got their cell phone numbers. Um, but after 10 years in vocational ministry, I realized just how true it is that I don't know if anybody remembers this sort of pre-Trump administration, but the whole big multi-ethnic church. Anybody remember the big push of like, we want to be multi-ethnic, we want to be diverse in the church, and it always made me laugh because I always thought to myself, well, if the white evangelical church wanted to be diverse, all they have to do is just take a Sunday off from their property and go to a Latino or Black or Brown or Asian church, and the church would be diverse overnight, right? But what I found is that oftentimes the white evangelical church it actually became a vehicle for assimilation. Um, they didn't want black and brown leaders; they wanted black and brown mascots, right? And then those mascots are culturally conditioned, to go out and seek other black and brown people that will assimilate into loving soft rock versus funk from the front of the church musically, or you know what I mean. Like it was just such a nonstop highway for assimilation. And I started to name that. And some pastors leaned in, and the ministry that I work for did not like that I called that out. I say this because I was the, I want to say caregiver, let's say, I'll use that term, for ministers who uprooted their families, moved to some all white town, Midwest, North, New York, whatever, upstate New York, East Coast, West Coast. They would go to a town, right, a missionary, to be a chaplain of a university. And I would get calls from black and brown ministers and some white bodied ones too, who would tell me things, stories like, hey, I don't know what to do. I'm raising my salary in order to feed my family. I have to, raise it monthly, right, from the generosity of folks. And they would say, the pastor just told me that if I don't bring my students to the Trump rally, that with the pastor and his family in the church, then I can go look for another job. And I'm the only brown person at this church, right? I would get calls like this time and time again, and some even more dark. And this experience really helped solidify for me just how much the white evangelical church has, essentially, for anyone who's a believer, if you know the story between the Jewish widows and the Greek widows, they did the opposite of what was done in scripture, right? Where I think the Greek widows were claiming that the Jewish widows were being given more distribution of resources, for their needs more than the Greek widows were, because in that day the church treated the widows and the broken and the bruised way better than Rome, right? And so, and that's what got Christians noticed by Rome, was how well they took care of their poor and their sick and their downtrodden. But in the church, they were giving more love and attention and resources to Jewish widows over Greek widows, if I'm remembering that correctly, Pastor Chris. And essentially, the church corrected that, but what the evangelical church has done is the opposite, right? And if anything, doubled down. And so that's sort of an experience of going through that realization, awakening. Some call it decolonizing your faith. If you know the journey of Lecrae, I went through a similar journey of persecution for speaking a little more like Jesus, than part of the church, not the whole church, but part of the church of Christ I wanted to hear. And so as I really start to name my experiences, I start to realize that there were stories, like from Jackie Robinson and Nagme and Althea Gibson and Roberto Clemente, that were similar. And so when Richard talks about in the beginning of this program, you got to go back, you got to find out the stories. It's not a magic school bus, school trip through history. It's an invitation to realize that you're not alone, that it's your story too. And so, with that being said, just quick check in, Chris. Do we have any callers that called in?
Yes, sir, Dr. Mike. I believe we do now. Caller, you're on the air with Dr. Thornhill. Go ahead with your question and or comment, please. Caller, you're on the air. Go right ahead with your question, please.
What up? What up? Talk to me. Who this?
Gregory Patrick.
Gregory Patrick. What up?
Sorry.
What up? Talk to me, bro.
I was just calling to just say I appreciate your word, appreciate the message that you bring in, the voice that you're bringing to memories that we've forgotten. I think it's very common that a lot of us, as men growing up, any men of any type of diversity, any type of struggle in any direction, have these sorts of memories that you kind of pass over and keep moving because you don't really have the time to reflect on them because either they're too painful at the time or it's just a part of your world. And so I appreciate so much that you've given voice to those memories and just the appreciation of the voice that like your book that taps into that for ourselves. And I really appreciate the things that you've done with this.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, sir. Where are you calling from?
Calling from
Fantastic.
Indiana, PA.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate that affirmation. That means a lot because um it's not easy to be the one to name the hard thing, you know. Um but what it gives room, it can feel like death, to be honest. Most of writing this book felt like dying. like like small deaths of confronting, where it would have been easier to just live in ignorance. It would have been easier, um, or it wouldn't have been as hard, right, to just live in ignorance and just keep going business as usual. But what I found even harder was leaving some stories unnamed. And because the more I told my story and more discovered my story in history and would share it to a few friends, the more I found out that as I told my story, their story got liberated. Right. And so thank you, Brother Gregory. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for calling in. Brother Chris, do we have any more callers?
Not at the moment, sir.
Okay, fantastic. Feel free to interrupt me if we got anybody. But at the end of the day, um, I I used to be I like to call myself a recovering DEI practitioner. There's a lot of different perspectives on DEI in the Black and Brown community, but what you got to understand is I was a DEI practitioner and consultant for I think like over 10 years vocationally, but probably longer than that unofficially. I was the Black or brown person that some white body with a title, either in HR or DEI, would use my brilliance to complete their job, right? And so when I finally got the title that matched the labor, um, I found a lot of people echoing what my dad told me when I first became a director or assistant director. He said, "I was like, Dad, guess what? I became blah 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 of culture and belonging, people and culture, whatever you want to call it, right?" And he said, "Man, that's a waste of time, son. You can't change white people." And I remember feeling so crushed, right? Because all I wanted was my dad's approval. But I got to tell you, um, he wasn't wrong, but he wasn't fully right. I learned that white institutions, especially, always have a ground zero button. They always have a restart button they can press. That no matter how much work that I have done in certain institutions and built up different things, and that in riverbeds that those that come after me can benefit from, actually creating meritocracy, and countering the nepotism and favoritism that usually lives in most politics, cultures, churches, and corporate and nonprofit entities. Um, that as soon as you leave, they start over and with doughy, sort of like Looney Tunes sad eyes, look for some replacement to start over with, um, until they burn them out too. And so that was my experience. So I call myself a recovering DEI practitioner. Um, and but at the end of the day, that's some of my backdrop. I'm trying to think what else. Do we got any more callers?
Not at the moment, sir.
Okay, that's fine. I'm trying to think what else to talk about. Let's see. Let me pick one of these questions here I wrote down. Uh, who is my audience? My audience is anyone who's a family member, anyone who's a multiracial kid, anyone who's a biracial kid, anyone who's adopted by white parents. That's the core target audience. The core target audience is anyone who lives and moves and breathes in quote unquote better neighborhoods, quote unquote better jobs, which is often code for just whiter ones, because we often think that uh, you know, that the better school is better, but in actuality, they just have different, better amenities. Because really it's just whiter, and oftentimes we collude with that belief because we think their ice is colder. We do. Black and brown folks, we think that all the time. And so confronting the realities of that being at the predominantly all white school or all white company is not the flex that we thought it was. Because I got, man, book two talks, I did my whole master's degree on all the ways that black and brown bodies suffer from autoimmune disorders, hair loss, sleeplessness, unable to get pregnant. I interviewed CEOs of black CEOs of all white companies that rose up, folks that are in the E-suite, black and brown folks, throughout my master's program and book two, to find out that the cost is way too high and so hidden and unnamed of what it means to be the only one with my face amongst those with white bodies. And now that's my core audience. My secondary audience is white bodies, because at the end of the day, um, I know so many white bodies that come up to me and it's like, yo, like I had a friend in high school or middle school that was black. And they were the only one in my class, right, of every generation, from boomers to cuspers to zillennials to millennials, to Gen Xers and all that kind of stuff. And I got to tell you, the consistent thing they always say is, first of all, they know their full name, like clear as day. They remember their whole name. And then secondly, they always say, like, I wonder what happened to them. But yeah, they were the only person in this family, or in this. They were the only black and brown person at the school, only black and brown person at my church, only black and brown person. And I want to invite that secondary target audience to really unpack the fact that, like, have you, what happened to them? Which often they wonder, right? But just not in the forefront of their minds. But what happened to them? What happened to them while they were there? And usually, if I get into at least one story, they start to tell me 5 or 10 more new ones and tell me, "Man, this happened," or someone said this one time. And I remember one woman was telling me, I remember Sally Johnson, and Sally Johnson was the first black girl to come to my high school, and my first black friend. And they always think they're their friends, and then just like blah 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 blah. And then they'd say, once they get a little courage, they'll be like, and then this thing happened, and I felt so bad for them, right? Or this one, someone said this thing or whatever. And at the end of the day, man, this book is for those people too, to recognize that, hey, their story is still continuing. But I think you should be a little more curious about what it cost them. If you're a white bodied grandparent with a black or brown grandchild, I think this book is for you. And so, with that being said, we got any more callers?
No, sir, not at the
All right,
moment.
fantastic. How much time we got left, brother Chris?
You got about 10 minutes before Mr. U comes back on.
10 minutes. All right. So, trying to think what else to talk to y'all about. Let's see. If you ever wondered, do Africans see themselves the same as African Americans? This book talks about that. They don't. If you've ever wondered about the cost of having white dads versus white moms of biracial kids, this book touches on that. If you've ever wondered if there's any tension between the black middle class and the black upper class and the black lower class, this book touches on that. Um, this book gives whisper to a future book coming on, are white moms bad for mixed kids? Um, and so I don't say yes or no to that. It's way more complex. I'm often, clickbait sort of categories that are talked about. If you've ever wondered if you're black enough or Latino enough, or why people care so much about the stuff, you're Latino, you don't care about it. You're black bodied, you don't care about it. Why should other people? This book is for you. Um, Ever wondered if your black or brown grandchild or nephew or niece or adopted child or child is having a great experience at the all white school? This book talks about that. And spoiler alert, they're not. If you think that your black or brown kid is going to an all white school and they're not being called the N word, you're out of your God given mind. Okay. If you don't think that they're not being ostracized and singled out, you're out of your mind and you're clueless, right? Um, and the funny thing is, even if they stick up for themselves, they can't fight everybody. They can't fight the teachers, the administration, and if they do fight, they're going to be seen as churlish pugilists. They're going to be seen as fulfilling a stereotype that they're just waiting for that black or brown body, young body, to fulfill in their imaginations. I met with a guy. A guy heard about this book in Newcastle, and he reached out to me. And he was a white dad of a biracial son, and he reached out and was like, "Can I please talk to you? I not only am I buying your book, but I think my son needs to meet you." And so, I mean, it felt a little sus, but I was like, "Man, why not?" Right? So we met at a fancy restaurant, and he proceeded to tell me a story of his biracial son. For him, the story started when his son was clinically his son 6 was clinically diagnosed with PTSD. Fast forward the tape of when I meet him, he tells me he's $100,000 deep into a lawsuit that the school district is about to settle with him because they know they messed up, right? But for the boy, the story started way sooner. You see, in group text, I think what, second or third grade, um, there were all these white kids calling him monkey, N word, you're the darkest person I ever met, darky, and then things escalated because it never got confirmed. And the father brought those texts to the school. Nothing was done. Um, Another time, his son was cornered in the bathroom by a bunch of white boys. They all wanted to touch his butt. Um, and that was brought up. Nothing changed. Um, and then the bullying progressed and escalated with every grade. And by the time he's not 6, he's 7 now, and so or 8, sorry, 8. And so by the time he got to whatever grade the 8-year-olds are in, he finally stuck up for himself and punched one of the bullies in the face. Right when he was calling him the N word or doing something to him and messed with his lunch, and what the school did is, first of all, they hired the mother of that boy to the school to become a teacher. They gave that boy some school district wide kindness award, but there were texts of him the night before calling him the N word over and over and over again. Right. And what's crazy is that's still happening today. And that's just one story. I mean, I can't tell you how many stories I still get of parents of black and brown kids realizing what's happening to their kids in the all white schools. And I'm looking at this white dad, right? And he's telling me like he's like on the verge of tears, like, and he starts crying and just how much work, and then he gets angry. He's like how much he's fighting for his son, right? And he confesses to me, Michael, like, my son didn't want to go to school. He missed 30 days of school. It got to the point where like we had to force him out of the car to go into the school. And I thought some before the clinical diagnosis, I would play motivational videos for him. I would force him out of the car and make him walk. I would do all this stuff, and then finally I realized he was being traumatized. And then I realized we need to have a different approach. And I asked him a question, one question. I'm listening to all this, right? And I said, with all due respect, man, thank you for sharing. Obviously, before we had this conversation, I told you I can't help with any legal process, but what I can do is listen and carry your story into a future book. And I asked him one question. I said, "Have you apologized to your son yet?" Well, before I asked that, I said, "How's your relationship with your son?" He said, "Rocky." And then I said, "Have you apologized to him yet for waiting for a diagnosis to believe him?" And it's stories like this that my book gave room for, where I get to sit with a dad, where I tell him a story about me and my white mother. And I'm not going to tell you his answer. That's his business. But what I told him was, I pray that your apology comes before he hits his 30s, for the sake of your and his relationship. And he's like, well, and, he said something effective like, I think my son knows I'm sorry. And I was like, yeah, have you said it though? And he was like, maybe I need to say it. I was like, maybe. And so that's why I wrote this book, because that may not be my story, um, but it may be someone's story that that's never felt safe enough to tell you. Why would they? But this book can give room for a deeper connection. I was called, and being black and brown and ADHD as a kid, I was called attention seeking. And I did a lot of behaviors that were not attention seeking, they were connection seeking. Being neurodivergent, you learn to mask and mirror and mimic because you're desperate for social connection. Did you know that babies in Romania die, healthy babies, because they have no one to look into their face? We are wired for connection, and without it, we will perish. And so neurodivergent people know that painfully, clearly, and viscerally. But being neurodivergent prepared me for what it meant to be black here in this country. And so, with that, I'll pause. Do we have any calls, Chris?
No.
No,
Okay.
sir. But I do have a quick question, if Mr. Utley doesn't mind, before he
Yeah.
actually comes on. Again, congratulations on this fantastic writing. This effort, I'm sure, has been instrumental to so many and a blessing to so many. My question, in brief, Dr. Thornhill, real quick. Being a truth teller, many times you're misunderstood and underappreciated or not appreciated at all. Have you encountered any negative criticism in any circles that you found yourself in? That this book has uncovered some wounds that people didn't really want that elephant in the room addressed. If so, how did you overcome that and still have the fortitude to continue on doing the great work that you're about, sir?
Yes, sir. So absolutely, this has happened. There are folks who don't want certain stories told. My mother doesn't speak to me anymore. My adopted white mother doesn't speak to me. My her biological biracial son doesn't speak to me anymore. Um, and so I know the cost of not just seeing things too clearly, but its danger as well. And I asked my older brother one day, like a year ago, I was like, man, I'm writing a book. He's got his doctorate. And I was like, I'm writing a book. Like, are you ever going to support me? Like, or ask about it? And his response was, Michael, I have students that write better than you. I just don't want you to embarrass yourself. So I very much know that experience. But I want to say this to those who are listening. Um, the thing that helped me keep writing, one of the things, was the simple sentence that your experience is your expertise. And when that's happened, I come back to the truth of my experience because I can't tell you how many times I thought I was crazy. I can't tell me how many times I thought that I was defective, that things going wrong in my gut, gastric peptic ulcers, right? Like my stool being out of control. Like I've never had terrible stool, and then I'd be in a job and my stool is crazy. Like hair loss, brittle nails, sleeplessness, right? Anxiousness, anxiety, like all these things that affected me physiologically, or to the point I thought I was defective or something was wrong with me. And then I can't tell you how lonely I've been. But then I realized I'm not alone. I'm not defective. That there's nothing wrong with me and there's nothing wrong with you, dear listener and reader. And that I'm not crazy. And the expertise of that experience and of each of these three things, realizing that these stories are worth naming, and so is yours. And so, does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir. Well said. Well put. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you see why I brought him back on, and you saw why I let him dictate this program. It's because he can tell you his story. But as he tells you his story, you can think about your story. Think about those kids that we've all experienced those things. No matter what, we all have experienced something that you've said. Maybe not the way you said it, or maybe not even the situation that you articulated it in. But we all have experienced different things. And I think it's important for all of us to know we're not alone in this. And there's a lot of kids out there who probably think the way that you thought. And there's a lot of kids who's going through a lot of things now that you just brought up. Because we take for granted, as you said, we take for granted everything's okay.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know, sometimes don't understand, said to somebody, how you doing? I'm okay. But we don't know they're saying it because they're programmed to saying they're
That's right.
okay. And so by bringing you back on, and by some of the things that you said about people being in positions and high positions and they know they can't mess up. And I've said it before, I'm guilty of it as well. And nobody sat there and told me I better do a good job, but I knew I had to do a good job.
You can't have one bad day.
And you know that. You have to stay on your A game. And sometimes I ask myself when I tell young people, you got to stay on your A game. You got to be better than. And then I say to myself, what are you telling them? Or
Mm-hmm.
you they believe that we're supposed to be all alike. But yet I'm telling them they got to be on their A game.
Mm-hmm.
Why should I tell them that when we've been teaching them we're all equal? And since we tell them we're all equal, then we have to understand that everybody goes through a different journey. And my point is that's why I have this program, Did You Know? Because everybody goes through different journeys. Everybody goes through different situations. I mean, like you said, you talk about mixed children. A lot of people don't know what they go through. They don't know, but they may assume, or they don't know what the parent goes through, whether it's the black or white father, white mother, or whatever. They don't know. They don't know what you said about being adopted because you didn't fit into the lineage of the overall family. You didn't fit in. So you were already from day one, you were already down at the bottom have to climb up the hill. But nobody knows that. But here's my point. You knew it. And by you telling your story, believe me, there's a lot of people out there just like you. And that's why I had you on. And you might only had one call or whatever, but that's not what it was about. What it was about, you articulating your journey. And even though it's your journey, believe me, and I'm going to end you with this. There's a whole lot of them that's on the same train that you're on, but nobody never talked about it. Nobody never thought about it, but you put it in a perspective. And I thank you for that. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you really got something out of this, because I got something out of it. So sometimes we look across the street, and even though we're on a road across the street, it may not be us, but it could be us. And let's be real, ladies and gentlemen. We all got family that's gone through a whole lot of things. And you brought it up, and I'm going to say this before, and you brought it up about race. You see, it's a little different because we have it, even in our own families, whether you're light skinned, dark skinned, people who have gone through, quote unquote, the paper bag test. We're guilty of it, but we don't want to acknowledge it. And if we acknowledge it, then hopefully we'll do a better job of looking at each other. So thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll be seeing you soon. Have a good day.
Thank you for watching Did You Know with Richard Utley. Please mark your calendar and join us every first and third Tuesday at 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube. Did you know? If you would like to be a guest on the show, or if you have an interesting topic or individual that you would like to see us discuss during future broadcasts, you can reach out to us on Facebook at Richard Utley. Until next time, have a nice day, and we will see you again for another Did You Know, and can be found on most of your favorite social media platforms.
Our passion is your fashion at Melissa's Custom Bow Ties and more. You and your entire family will stand out and make an unforgettable statement at weddings, graduation ceremonies, church events, holiday parties, and more. At Melissa's Custom Bow Ties, we offer several unique and exclusive selections for every occasion, ensuring a perfect match for your tuxedo, event, or formal function. Crafted with precision and with you in mind, our bow ties promise unforgettable memories, durability, and a refined finish. Great for last-minute gifts, anniversaries, and birthdays. Our fully adjustable, pre-tied designs offer convenience without compromising style. Remember, Melissa's Custom Bow Ties and more for the epitome of sophistication, class, and exclusivity.